So today we will be reviewing the Bill of Rights. We have briefly discussed Amendments 1 through 5, but we will be diving deeper into those as well as going over Amendments 6 through 10. So now the standard that we have been focused on is Standard 4. And that states that we need to demonstrate an understanding of the rights and responsibilities associated with citizenship in the United States, specifically looking at our rights as citizens, like what rights do we have. We have discussed previously that they added the Bill of Rights to the Constitution because the people who were building our government, like James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, felt that there were rights that needed to be protected that weren't stated in the Constitution. So they added the Bill of Rights. So today on our agenda, we have review the amendments like we talked about, 1 through 5, 6 through 10. To do this, you guys will have to take out the completed guided notes. There'll be that were handed out. You'll fill those in. If you have any questions or anything like that, make sure to let me know. It's important that as we move through the information, students are understanding the information and that they're taking it in, having time to write the information down. Then we have the Kahoot checkpoints that we'll be able to complete, and then the iCivics game at the end to apply what you've learned through this information to this game. So for the First Amendment, we know that there are many things that are covered under this amendment, right? So we have religion, assembly, petition, press, and speech. So if you look at the first letters just straight down, it spells out RAPS, R-A-P-P-S, which is a good way to remember what they all are if you struggle to remember them since there's multiple. So we have the freedom to religion, which means we are welcome to practice any religion that speaks to us, right? We are not all forced to, practice Christianity. We're not all forced to practice Judaism. We're not all forced to be Buddhist or Hindu or Muslim, anything like that. They let us pick what religion we'd like to practice. We also are not forced to practice a religion either. Assembly and petition, right? So we have the right to assemble in a group in our communities, with our friends, with people, and to petition if there's something we don't like. We are able to create a petition and get people to sign it to try to enact change. Then we have press and speech, which usually go hand in hand. We have the right to receive information through the press. We have the right for news outlets to tell us what's going on. There's multiple out there, newspapers, magazines, everything like that. And free speech, right? People talk a lot about free speech, but you have to be careful because there are situations like hate speech, which is if you are spreading like very false, very negative information about a specific group that could be potentially harmful. That is not protected always. So be aware of the differences, right? Then we have our Second Amendment, which basically protects the right to keep and bear arms. And that means that we have the right to own firearms. We have the right to own guns and keep them in our house. It was basically created because the need for a regulated militia at the time. So the time was 1791, as we know, and it's important to know that at the time we did not have a military. We didn't have the Navy, the Army, the Coast Guard. We didn't have all of these different branches. So we needed a way that if anything were to happen to us, we needed to be able to protect our towns, our families. And that was the point of this amendment, was we needed to know that we weren't going to get in trouble if we had guns in our home trying to protect ourselves. So the Third Amendment, so I'm going to read this one. So it says, prohibits the involuntary quartering of soldiers in private homes. So quartering and voluntary, kind of what are those words? So basically, the government cannot force you to bring a soldier into your home and provide for them a place to sleep or eat or anything like that. The government cannot force you to do that. It has not been of use in our recent past because there's been very minimal conflicts on U.S. soil since it was enacted After the Civil War, we really haven't had much conflict where that has needed to be enacted. So, moving to the Fourth Amendment, we have unreasonable search and seizure. So some of you may have heard the term search and seizure before, and it only applies to searches and seizures that are ruled unreasonable under the law. So for them to be deemed unreasonable, it means that there was no warrant, there was no reasonable doubt, that the police officers or the people involved did not go through the necessary steps to have a lawful search and seizure. So this is to protect citizens from the government or police officers just coming into their homes and arresting them or taking things out of their home without cause. So we have the Fifth Amendment, right? So on the left, I've listed the key terms: grand jury, double jeopardy, self-incrimination, due process of the law, and private property, 1 through 5. Then on the other side, I have what their definitions are, but they're all mixed matched. So the point of this slide is to have students raise their hand, see if they can match up which ones go with which. Now, if you're familiar with the Bill of Rights, you'd be able to read these and know which go with which. So anything that is owned by someone, well, we know that that's private property, cannot be tried for the same crime again after a not guilty verdict. So that would be double jeopardy, right? So as teachers, we should know the answers to these, but you could either read grand jury and then see if one of the students can find the right definition, or you can flip it where you read the definition and then see if the students can find the word that would match up to that. This way you're kind of getting different thinking involved. Now you're starting to get students involved in the conversation. Also through the other slides, make sure you're answering questions if students have questions. So after you finish that, I have a Kahoot linked in here that just kind of goes back over those amendments 1 through 5. This is a form of assessment that's really great to see in the moment what students are understanding and what they might be struggling with. Kahoot, quizzes, Bookit, things like that. Those are really good for informal feedback to the teacher to kind of see where we're at with information. So we'd move on to the Sixth Amendment, which focuses on protecting the rights of a criminal defendant, right? So you might need to explain to your students that a defendant is the person who is being charged for the crime or who is being put on trial. So everybody that's put on trial has the right to a speedy trial. So they can't, keep them in jail for years and years and years and years while they're trying to get the trial in front of a judge. They have a right to a lawyer. They have a right to an impartial jury. So I would explain the word impartial means a jury that is not biased, is not already thinking that they're guilty, right? They need a fair shot. And then they also have the right to know who accused you and what the charges are. So you get to know who is basically saying that these things happened, and then what you're going to be charged with. So that's what the Sixth Amendment protects. Then we have the Seventh Amendment, which kind of follows in suit with the Sixth, and it allows for civil cases to be heard and decided upon by a jury of their peers. So the Sixth Amendment could be for more of the focused on more of the larger federal cases, whereas the Seventh Amendment focuses more on the civil cases. So just make sure that the students understand the difference between the two of them when you're moving forward with the lesson. So then we move to the Eighth Amendment, which also follows in line with 6th and 7th. So it would be a good way to help students know what's going on for the 6th, 7th, and 8th Amendments. So the Eighth Amendment basically follows that there can be no excessive bail set for people who are on trial. So say someone, broke into a car and stole it, you could not set that bail at $5 million. It's excessive. Not a lot of people have $5 million. It wouldn't be constitutional. Then there's no excessive fines and no cruel or unusual punishment. So a lot of the pictures on this slide are cruel and unusual punishment that would be not protected. So then we move into the Ninth Amendment. So 9 and 10, these amendments are usually more difficult to understand because we don't really necessarily talk about them as much. So James Madison created the Ninth Amendment so that it would be clear that there were more rights that people had than just the ones listed in the Constitution and just the ones listed in the Bill of Rights. There's more things that we have as humans that would be considered rights. So what is it saying, right? So these rights that are protected that are not stated specifically in the Constitution are known as enumerated rights. They are basically means that they're not stated, right? So people have rights that are not explicitly stated in the Constitution, like the presumption of innocence, right? So when you are put on trial, you are innocent until proven guilty. That's a right, but it's not specifically stated. We also have a right to privacy, which is something that's not explicitly stated in the Constitution. We also have the right to travel across state lines and across the country. We have the right to make decisions about our body in some cases, things like that that are not specifically stated. Also, as a teacher, when you're teaching like the Ninth Amendment and sometimes the 10th Amendment too, giving them examples are good. So like with the coronavirus vaccine, people had a choice if they wanted to get it or not. Try to use, kind of up-to-date examples that wouldn't be to cause too much of an issue in the classroom. So then we move to the 10th Amendment. So basically it focuses on illustrating the balance of power between the states and the federal government. So there are rights that are reserved for the federal government, and there's rights that are reserved for the state government. So the rights that are not clearly stated for the federal government are left up to the people and to the state. So you get the right to vote for things, elections, to vote people into office, right? The government doesn't just appoint who goes into who's our governors and things like that. We as the people vote for that. Then the state has rights that the federal government doesn't have. So they collect state taxes, they issue licenses, they regulate trade with other states, things like that, that people at the federal level can't control. So it's important to know that there are specific things that our federal government allocates to the states to regulate and deal with. So some like licenses, like marriage licenses, teaching licenses, driver's licenses, all of these things, they're not federally regulated. So if you, in Virginia, if you only have to be 15 and a half to get your driver's license, in other states you might have to be 16 exactly to get your driver's license, things like that. Same goes with like marriage license. You can't just ask the federal government to give you a marriage license. You have to do that within the state that you're getting married in, things like that. So moving on to the next checkpoint. So the first Kahoot checkpoint was for 1 through 5. This checkpoint is for 6 through 10. So that way it kind of breaks up chunking the information, another informal assessment for your students to be able to use and kind of see where they're at if there's information you need to go over. Some students might be kind of caught up on the 6th, 7th, and 8th Amendments. That way you can go back through and help differentiate what information they might need you to go back over and what information they are able to understand. So at the end of that, if as a lesson, if you need to chunk it into like 1 through 5 and 6 through 10 on the next day, then you can use the iCivics game. Do I have rights to kind of solidify overall what was covered in the lecture? So the iCivics game, Do I Have Rights, basically sets each player up to run a law firm, and they are reading cases and they have to decide if the person has a right, if it's covered by the Bill of Rights, and things like that. So it tests their knowledge, and it's a good way to have them collaboratively communicate with their partners, like shoulder partners or table partners, if they're not understanding the information. It helps them realize if there's specific rights that they didn't understand as well as they thought they did, to go back and read into those. It also allows you to kind of walk around, circulate as a teacher to see where students are at. It also gives you a chance to check the guided notes, make sure that they were able to get all the information. If not, let them know that where they can find the information, just to make sure that they're effectively using the game. So also make sure that you are monitoring them on the game, that they're actually using it effectively. And you can always like pause during the game, do check-ins, see what they're learning, and add like an exit slip for them as well. So basically that kind of wraps up a little Bill of Rights mini lesson. Of course, you can expand on it. You can have little activities to go with each of the amendments if you wanted to kind of build on the information. If I were to do it, as a full lesson, I would definitely break it into probably 2 or 3 days, just to make sure that you're effectively covering each of the rights that are protected through the Bill of Rights.